Welcome back. So we're about to finish up this section on atomic emission spectra by bringing it back to the structure of the atom. Now that we know more about what exactly light is and how it's related to energy, let's circle back to that picture from the very beginning of the chapter. So we see here the picture of, this is hydrogen gas that is being excited by electricity, and the pink light coming out is being broken into the different colors of light that are making up that pink through a prism. And we can see that there is a band of red, and then a band of like a greenish teal color, and then a blue, and then a violet. And so scientists knew at this point that the only thing inside of a hydrogen atom was a proton and an electron. So the only thing that could be making this light must be the electron. And they sort of expected to see energy coming out, but what they expected was that full rainbow. And instead they just saw these bands. So what that meant was that the electrons were only losing a very specific amount of energy, because those colors have specific wavelengths, and we know now we can translate wavelength to frequency, and we can translate frequency to energy. So there's only specific amounts of energy coming out. So taking that information, scientists proposed this sort of updated model of the atom. We're going to learn, it's going to be called the Bohr model of the atom, as it was a scientist by the name of Niels Bohr who did much of the work on this. So the idea is that we have two different types of atoms here. This is called an excited, and down here, ground state. Ground state is where or how an electron or an atom typically is when we're not pumping it full of electricity or putting it in a flame. So the electron is orbiting about the nucleus. Then when we add energy to it, in this case by putting electricity through it, that electron becomes excited. And what that means is the electron moves to a higher energy orbit, orbiting further from the nucleus. So you can see here, energy level 2, the second energy level. And it only stays there for a split second. And then it falls back down to the first energy level. And when it falls back down to that first energy level, it gives off a photon of light. That little quantum of energy is released. And because that electron can't go out here and it can't fall to here, it has to be on these very specific orbits, these very specific energy levels. That's how we get those very specific colors. So again, the atomic spectrum of hydrogen, when excited electrons jump down or fall down to a lower energy level, they cause light to be emitted. And those light photons have a specific wavelength that depends on the difference of the energy between the energy levels. And scientists can detect this light, fancy name electromagnetic radiation, and form what we call the atomic spectrum of the element. That's the picture with the very specific, that's the line emission spectrum or atomic emission spectrum. That's unique to every element. Every element has a unique atomic emission spectra. And what we're going to do with this diagram is really color it in so that we can help understand what's going on. So an electron normally would live in the first energy level. So of all the hydrogen atoms in your body right now, of which there are an immeasurable number almost, those electrons are orbiting in the ground state. But under certain circumstances, we can excite those electrons, and they will move to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh energy levels. When they do, they can hang out there for a split second, and then they fall back down. If they fall back down all the way to the first energy level, they would give off a lot of energy, and that would be in the in the ultraviolet range, so we wouldn't see that. And if they fall back down to the third energy level, they would give off just a little bit of energy, and that would be in the infrared range, and we don't see that either. What do we see? We see that visible spectrum, and that's when electrons fall back down to the second energy level. So you can see here, when an electron falls down from the third energy level to the second energy level, it gives off a certain amount of energy, and that is yellow-orange light, and it's 656 nanometers. And so somewhere around here, we see that great, bright, reddish-orange light. And then it will sometimes fall, from the fourth energy level back down to the second energy level. And that's where we see this bluish green energy band at 486 nanometers. The dark blue band comes from when it goes from, let's say, the fifth energy level down to the second energy level. And that's at 434. Now, the last one up here, the ultraviolet, you can see that's at 122 nanometers. We can't see that with our eyes. That's not in the visible spectrum. So this is the visible light portion of hydrogen. Every element has a unique pattern. And so this picture here is what we would call the Bohr model of an atom, or this is a Bohr model. It shows the electrons existing in the circular energy level orbits. And as we'll learn in the next video, there are parts of that are correct, and there are parts of that are not the whole story. It definitely gets more complicated. This is probably what you learned up to in middle school, maybe not the theory about how we figured it out, but unfortunately it gets more complicated from here.